All right, so you've had a shoulder surgery. Now what you want to do is make sure that you protect the shoulder repair. So the first phase of therapy is to protect the shoulder and focus on the front end stages of rehab to allow you to do more of things on the back end. On the front end, the first things we want to focus on is motion. We want to get as much motion as possible under a timely manner. Now, the first 2 weeks are the most critical. It's most critical because what you do on those first 2 weeks is either going to speed up and fast forward your rehab on the back end, or you're going to focus on playing catch up. So first and foremost on the front end, we want to protect the surgical repair. Now, all shoulder surgeries have the surgical incision here in the front. So anytime to get into the deep aspect of the shoulder, the surgeon is gonna have to cut through some of those tissues. After the surgical repair, when they go through and sew them up, we want to make sure that we don't do anything that is going to disrupt them. So our goal in therapy is to progress you along in a timely manner to appropriately stress tissues at the right time with the right amount of intensity to allow you to progress and rehabilitate as quickly as possible. Now, if we were to go and take the shoulder, we can break it up into a couple different phases, or safe zones, if you will. So you have zone A in the shoulder, which essentially allows you to go all the way up to about 90 degrees. Safe zone B allows you to come all the way up to 180. C is going to be anything beyond that range back here, as well as back here. Now, in the front end of therapy, we want to make sure that we do not go outside of zone A. Now, the problem is that only shows our pattern in this normal sagittal plane, or this forward motion. There's a lot of other movements that we have to occur within this. We don't automatically, day one, want to be moving like this. So typically after the first few days, we want to protect and prevent any unwanted motion for usually about the first 3 days. After about 3 days, it really is appropriate to start slowly loading tissues appropriately in order to prevent any unwanted tightening. Now, when it comes to the shoulder, you will either be, if you've had a surgical repair, you're either going to be in a sling or a gunslinger. Where a gunslinger usually just has a pillow that puts your arm in a little bit of what's known as abduction. Now, I want to talk about the least stressful position of the shoulder is known as your loose packed position. It's known as this because it has the least amount of stress of any other position on the shoulder. And that is essentially where your arms are out like this. The easiest way I like to think of this is if you imagine yourself getting in a hot tub or a pool, and you're just sort of floating there, your arms are naturally going to go into this position. Okay, this is sometimes known as a dead man position because you'll naturally just sort of move into all of those positions when unweighted from gravity. So that position, if you will, is going to be the most comfortable position. That's the reason they usually put you in that abduction pillow underneath to really make it as comfortable as possible. Now, from here, we are going to want to focus on a little bit of motion. Now, mind you, we want to make sure that we do this in a guided manner, not stressing too much, but stressing the appropriate amount to allow for the maximum therapeutic window and rehabilitative goals. So when it comes to rotation, if we imagine this here is neutral, all the way coming out here like this is external rotation, and coming from inside of that is internal rotation. So if we can imagine that a position similar as I'm in now, is a neutral position, kind of where it's nice and protected. This is 0. And if we look down and we see an angle here, right, where we're pointing, and that's a neutral position, all the way to here is 90 degrees. So make a quick mental note, and if you've had a surgery, go ahead and do this on the other side. Find where 45 degrees is, and then back off about 20% of that, and that's going to be about 30 degrees. This is important because within your first roughly 4 weeks, we're not going to go beyond that. Reason being is we want to protect the shoulder. Now, when you focus on externally rotating your arm, what's really cool about the shoulder is the front. If this is the front part of the shoulder here, and this is the shoulder blade, by rotating your arm backward like this, it actually glides forward. And by rotating your arm downward, it glides backwards. So because when you have a surgical procedure and they cut through these front tissues here, we want to prevent that. Because they have been stressed, we want to make sure that we're not stressing them too much that it opens it up. But we don't want to at the same time not stress them at all, because then we're dealing with trying to play catch up later on the back end, which you don't want to do. So what I find works really best is after about 1 week after your surgical procedure, you want to start going maybe about 10 degrees total of external rotation. Now, you don't want to do this actively. You really want to do this passively. And the best way to do this is for you to use your other arm. I always like to have you do this and not somebody else, because you're in 100% control. And then I want to make a quick note that this should not be painful in any way, shape, or form. Most people will actually say it feels pretty good, and it should, but this should not be painful at all. If it is painful in any way, then you want to go ahead and stop. Now, if we can imagine, 10 degrees is not a lot. I'm going to move my hand here so you can see. If I was actively moving, it's about this, okay? So it's really about 10 degrees is about 1 inch. It's not a whole lot of motion. What I like to do is use my other hand, and I really like to have it supported. So if you can find a good table or desk, that is going to work well. So, and if you need to, you can lean forward as needed, but don't try to put any stress on that side. I like to start with making my hand as a fist. I find if I put my hand on a fist, like right at my wrist position, that really does put me in a relatively neutral position, and it should feel nice and comfortable. From there, as far as increasing the range, all I'm actually doing is moving my thumb. So you're just going to lift up like this, and I'm using my thumb to raise it up. I'm not doing much of anything. Should be nice and slow. And truthfully, many people will even say they don't really feel much of anything at all, but they'll say feels kind of good. Feels nice to actually get a little bit of movement there. And the cool thing about this actually has some analgesic effects, which means by adding a slight little bit of motion at that joint, it can actually decrease some of the pain. But what's even more beneficial is that slight little motion creates an effect that actually gives nutrition to that joint, which is actually going to aid in that healing. It's going to let the body know, hey, we're doing a little bit, we're stressing it enough in an appropriate and guided manner to allow for proper tissue healing. Now, our main goal is really each week to add 5 to 10 degrees, worth no more than about 30 to 40 degrees after about 4 weeks. So really what I like is starting around, what I find works really, really well and will set you up for success, is after about 1 week of therapy, or 1 week after the surgery, start doing this, okay? Up to about 10 degrees. That's about 1 inch. It's not a whole lot of movement. Then each week, we can increase by another inch or another 10 degrees. By the end of week 4, we should be up to about 30 degrees, which is going to be about here. Okay, so it's a little bit bigger of a motion that you're going to allow to have, but that's going to put you in a good position to start getting these tissues to start healing well. But the benefit here is it will not do anything that is going to disrupt the surgical repair. So I want you to feel confident that there's nothing you're doing here that is going to hurt you.